There we go. Hello.
Hi, how are you feeling?
Better, but tired. The
Yeah.
wedding was, I had my son's wedding this past weekend, so it was a lot. It was a lot when you were sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, better. Hi Dan.
It was a
Hello.
good wedding.
It was. It was fun. It was yeah, it was good. All right. So are there any questions from last week's material? No. Okay. All right. And so tonight we're having Laura, you're coaching Dan, right?
I don't know, am I?
I think you are.
Okay. Oh boy.
Yeah.
No kidding. Dan, you better be ready, Dan.
Dan's always ready.
Always ready. Let's do it.
All right. So, so Holly, you and I will be observing with our observation form. And let's see. And I have mine up. All right. So, yeah, let's do the coaching first, and then we'll do the lesson, and then we'll take a break after the coaching. Then we'll do the lesson and the activity, and we should be good to go. So Holly and I are going to go off screen, and you guys are going to be on screen. And Laura, you're going to have about 35 minutes. It's 6:05, so 6:35, 6:40, okay? And you have the floor.
All right. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey, Lori, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Um, Before we get started, is there anything that you need to clear before we start our conversation?
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm ready to go.
Awesome. So during this call, I'm going to take some notes, and I'm happy to share that with you if that's something you're interested in.
Absolutely. I love notes.
Awesome. So what would you like to work on in today's session?
So for the topic I kind of wanted to cover, I think it's an important one. I struggle with I guess it's kind of twofold, but in one. Coming from the corporate executive world, things were very structured, things were very planned, and I struggle now with organization and time blocking and setting, keeping papers in order and keeping things straight, keeping a calendar, sticking to the calendar. So I feel like in corporate, I was forced to always live from a calendar, to live from having to stay organized. And now being an entrepreneur, it's much more of a struggle for me.
So you mentioned a couple of things. So I just want to get a little bit more clear. So you mentioned organizing, time blocking, setting a calendar, keeping to the calendar. Is there one specific thing out of all of that that's more important to you?
Um, I think I think it's I think it's the organizational skill of um, sticking to a calendar when I no longer have that um, ultimate responsibility where I have to, and it's something that obviously helps with productivity. And you know, when I have clients or when I have things, I'm great with that now. But the times for other things, I'm not so good at adding them to the calendar and then sticking to that. So things that are like hard obligations, I'm great at sticking to because they're hard obligations. And when they're not hard obligations, I struggle with sticking to those things.
So what I hear you say is that you're really looking to get organized and stick to your calendar for those hard obligations, but also when they're not that crucial. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. When things don't strike me as um if things don't have extreme importance, or if it's a non-negotiable, or if it's not a non-negotiable, I will sway from it. When things are hard in stone, where it's a hard obligation that I've committed to with another person, whether it's a client consulting or coaching or any of my hard business venture stuff, it's definitely, I'm great at it. When it comes off of anything not directly related to that and not a hard commitment, I sway.
And so how will you know we've achieved um, this organizational component that you're looking for at the end of the session?
It's a great question. I think coming up with some system or systems, and maybe kind of like a better understanding of root cause analysis, you know, what's causing it, and then how do I move forward to take some action steps, some clear action steps towards resolution and getting back to um, sticking to a calendar holistically.
And how important is it for you?
Hmm. I think it's super important. Um, I think it's super important. I think there's some trauma behind it, from having a schedule of 8 to 10 hours a day that was completely booked, sometimes double booked and triple booked. And having that, getting past that trauma and being able to live by a calendar with a positive outlook would be extremely important to me, extremely helpful and important.
So you mentioned a couple of keywords, but before we kind of dive into that, you're ultimately looking for organizing yourself through your calendar, making sure that your non-negotiables and then the ones that don't fall in as a non-negotiable, if they're on the calendar, they get honored. And you're ultimately just doing that because you know that, I think you said that it just keeps you really organized and accountable. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So by having those systems in place, it's the way that I'm able to be, you know, a high performer and stay into my routines, make sure I'm hitting my routines and stay on course towards achieving my goals, and you know, not varying from my soft commitment and going off track. So absolutely, just being organized, sticking to it, and and getting back to living by a calendar, and at least during the week.
You said in a previous life, before you became an entrepreneur, you had some trauma around it because you found yourself triple booked, living. Your whole life was based off of your calendar of where you needed to be. What would be something that would support you in recognizing the value of the calendar, but it doesn't feel as traumatic for you and having to live on that calendar?
It's a great question. I think I mean, I keep telling myself it's time and just giving myself grace around it and taking the time to understand that the hard commitments are getting done and that I'm going the right direction towards, um, some of those softer commitments and softer obligations. So I think not so much achieving perfectionism, but achieving progress towards it would come from I guess achieving, sticking to more, maybe not perfection, but sticking to some of the things that are important to me, not just to others. So whether it's fitness, I think some of those commitments that put me into that high performance category, sticking to some of those self commitments that I let slide. Because when it's about other people, I show up consistently. When it's about me, I think I struggle with the, maybe later is a better time.
You mentioned a couple of different things. You mentioned about how your commitment to other people, right? When there's something else that somebody wants your support around, you drop everything and you do that. You don't always do that for yourself. You do stay committed when it's a client, a business venture. So I'd love to ask you, like standing there with everything that you've shared with me so far, what's the best place for us to start?
I think the best place to start is I guess, getting into the specifics of a few of the non-negotiables that are important and getting those and taking those from soft commitments into hard commitments and that certainty around they are now non-negotiables.
So where do you want to begin?
I think the one non-negotiable that I have to get consistent onto, no matter if there's 100 things going on or whatever that looks like, it's back to my health and fitness routine consistently. And I lived for, many years, probably 10 plus years, even traveling, and 6 a.m. every day I was at the gym. So getting back to a hard commitment with one thing, such as my gym routine, 5 days a week, getting back to a a hard commitment on that. And I think starting there is a good place, and then growing through the other soft commitments, and then moving those over to the hard commitment side.
And you mentioned the gym 5 days a week. You said 6 a.m. Is that something you want to still commit to?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easy when you no longer have a set time to begin work. So when it's an 8 o'clock start or 7:30 start, 6 o'clock at the gym was kind of a non-negotiable. So that was the time I was able to get there, get consistent, get my workout and supplements and vitamins and minerals and all those things in before the day started, and then feel great. So I do feel that that's the commitment I want to get back to the being every morning, starting my day 6 a.m. at the gym, and then followed by my journaling practices and the rest of my morning routine. That's super important.
You keep mentioning soft commitments. What comes up for you when I mention soft commitments?
Hmm. I think what comes up for me is it's not important enough to make it a non-negotiable. And I'm making it a non-negotiable. I'm making it a negotiable, so I'm not sticking to it. I'm not holding myself accountable. I'm not set level of discipline. And I've always had, and now by having unless I have a client, there's not a hard start time at 8 o'clock. So it's very easy to say, hey, I'll go later. And later becomes sometimes you don't go, sometimes you do. And 5 days becomes 3, sometimes it's 4. So there's just some consistency. And to me, it's super important, health and fitness. And my morning routine is like everything. I know when I feel and play my best that's what it takes. And I did it for years. And now being a year out of corporate, to not have that, my day doesn't go as well. I think it's everything from stress levels to productivity to performance. So I definitely feel that it's somewhere I have to put myself first, and I have to make it in concrete, this has to happen.
You mentioned that the gym is now going to be a non-negotiable 6 a.m. 5 days a week. What would be another soft commitment that you want to turn into a non-negotiable?
I think all of it's connected. So definitely I call it my morning routine, which is reading every day, which is like getting back to journaling. And, I've got like a 6-step morning routine that's like partially fitness, partially journaling, part gratitude, part reading. And there's a very disciplined course of action. So I think it's not just the gym, but it's putting myself first and saying these are back being at the top. So it's following that calendar and following my morning routines that I struggle with. And I think the deeper part of this is just putting myself first, putting those commitments to myself and putting myself first and saying, I'm going to get this done. So I think it's deeper to the point of making myself a priority.
You've mentioned several times putting yourself first. And now you mentioned making yourself a priority. If you couldn't screw it up, what would that look like for you?
I think it would look like feeling proud and accomplished of being back on track, and then being able to add back in other components of my day that move the dial, that I just don't stay too consistently. So, really getting back to time blocking and, doing it for me. And when it was somebody else saying this has to be on your calendar, it makes it different when you show up. But when you don't have somebody saying, hey, these are all the things, whether it's for yourself or for others, I've let myself slide. So I think it's just kind of, without beating myself up, just getting back on track for me. And what are the things that are important? And definitely the health and fitness piece, the reading piece, the daily routines, and then whatever else is important that I need to get onto my calendar and stick to my calendar. And I think just that feeling of accomplishment and that feeling of discipline will definitely, help regain that confidence in myself.
How do you determine what's important?
It's a great question. I think my level of importance is going off of what's coming up for me, rather than what's aligned to the bigger goals and bigger picture of what I'm working on. So I think taking that step back and thinking that through, my actions need to be more realigned with my bigger goals, my bigger purpose, my bigger goals, and not just the short term move the dial. So having better actions, or actions more aligned with my ultimate goals, and then sticking to them. So
And what does more aligned look like for you?
I feel more aligned has to do with what my actions are. Do they move the dial in finance? Do they, with my finances, do they move the dial in health and fitness? Do they move the dial in spirituality? Do they move the dial in whatever, all the segments of life? And is what I'm doing moving me towards that goal? And a lot of what I find myself doing is filler time rather than productivity time. So it sounds good at the time to do stuff that's great, shop on Amazon, but at the same time, it's stuff that's not aligned with moving me towards my goal and all of my goals. So I think I would feel super accomplished to get some of these in line, that are some actions that actually align to fitness, some just some certainties around that.
So at the beginning of this call, you mentioned that you want to get organized and sticking to your calendar. And what would be really beneficial for you is to just get organized and recognize your non-negotiables and what soft commitments are really should be part of your non-negotiables. How are we doing so far?
I think we've made some strides in getting to that deeper thought process of the importance of the daily actions need to align towards my bigger goals. One, and two, I think we've done a good job with the realization of that self-worth, that self-commitment, that my non-negotiables have to be non-negotiables. So I have to honor myself. So it's respect for myself. And it's definitely just talking it through that those things have to become, I feel like I'm almost letting myself down by not doing it. So it's a lack of respect for myself by not sticking to it, by not staying consistent, by not, getting those things accomplished. So I think we've done a good job with just coming to that self-realization of there's a major importance, just like everything else on the calendar, that my things need to be non-negotiables as well.
And you mentioned something pretty important. Respect and honor for yourself. When you think about your goals, and you mentioned going to the gym, what other goals do you have that you would feel you would respect and honor yourself if you remained consistent, disciplined, and committed?
It's a great thought process there. I think most of my goals are around travel and adventure. They're around financial, but the financial really happens first, and then from having the financial helps with travel and adventure. So it's I think setting some mapping out of really clear goals as well as those daily routines on a map would really help me to add them to my calendar. So I think I have a little bit more work to do to get to the clarity of what's in those silos, and then what are the actions, towards them, and then getting on my calendar. And maybe that's the reason I'm not sticking to it. Maybe they're not the right actions that align to those goals. So that's actually a good realization.
If you had to think about one goal around your finances, what would that be?
Easy. It's like $10 million and I'd be good. Easy. 10
Okay, so
million, live off of dividends. It's super easy.
all right, so you have the gym at 6 a.m. with the rest of your morning routine. You're making $10 million a year. What kind of travel and adventure goal would you set?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So I think my travel adventure goals are, I'm kind of thinking small. Like most of them are a week here, a week there. And what I'd really like to do is do some bigger ventures, do some bigger, you know, spend a couple months, traveling Thailand and, really understanding their culture and just, volunteering, supporting them. Like, how can I actually do some good in the world in some other countries? So I definitely would say it would be not just going places, but purposefully going places. Like going to places and making impact in some other countries, maybe even some places in the US, but definitely in probably more impactful adventure, but not just sightseeing.
And when you think about the commitment to yourself and respecting and honoring yourself, so you can achieve these goals that we've talked about today,
Mhm.
what would stop you?
It's a good question. Like the story I'm telling myself, it comes from living by a calendar and trauma from 23 years in corporate. So, and that's the story I'm telling myself, which probably isn't true. Um, I think coming back to just following through on those making every commitment. If I agree to it, it's a non-negotiable. And that's the way I think it has to become. Like if I commit to it and say I'm going to do it, I have to just get back to there is no non-negotiable there. That everything that's a commitment is a commitment. There's no soft commitment. It is what it is. And if I say I'm going to work on something for 2 or 3 hours, I've talked about doing commercial real estate. I've got a lot of contacts. It's 2 hours a day. It's 2 hours a day. And, stop making the excuses to myself.
And what support would you need in order for you to stick to your calendar?
Hmm. I feel like it's stop making it an option and to get back to that change of mindset that it has to be, what I commit to is what I do. I don't know that I have a better system in place. I mean, I have the calendar, I have the reminders, I have those different things and I set and it works out for a week and then fades away. So just staying consistent to it, just staying and maybe it's maybe just having that conversation with friends and family to stay in the conversation of commitments.
So, how would you like to close today's session?
Um, I think just reflecting on some of the self-realizations of the bigger picture, that it's commitments to myself that I need to follow through, and that every commitment's a commitment. It's not a non-negotiable. If I'm saying I'm going to do something, just because there's no consequence or reward, that I still need to do it. And I think it's just that realization that everything, because there's really right now, if I don't do it, there's really no consequence and there's really no reward for completing it. So I think it's going back to the self-discipline and the self-respect of I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So yeah, I think it's been really helpful just to kind of talk that through and just gain some clarity.
And what would you say is your biggest takeaway from today's call?
I think my biggest takeaway is Stop making excuses to myself, make myself important, make myself a priority. And, the things for myself, whether it's fitness, doesn't matter if it's on the calendar, it's important. It doesn't matter if something else is more important. It's sticking to that commitment and making myself important. Getting back to that.
Great job today, Dan. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Laura.
I am out of practice.
Okay, I was gonna
Oh.
ask you. What do you feel, well, let's think about I think there was one thing, I personally think there was one thing that kind of threw off the rest of the conversation. You tell me, what do you feel was going on in the session?
One, I couldn't get present. I couldn't get focused. I think it was probably because I didn't expect to do this, so I wasn't like mentally prepared. But that's just an excuse too. But I felt like I did not lock down the coaching agreement. I didn't go deep enough in it, and I kind of was like, well, I felt like I could work with what he said to me, that I could get him somewhere, but I really needed to go deeper in order to get him clear and me clear and like more concrete. And then it kind of went sideways when he mentioned like trauma about like his past job. And I was like, what direction do I go?
Okay, all right. So here's the first thing I'm going to say. Yeah, the coaching agreement. There's kind of like I don't know, is anybody hearing that dinging sound? I don't know what it is. But if you know what it is, do you hear that? It's like
I'm on mute,
Anyway.
so it's not me.
anyway. So so you asked the topic, right? You never asked for an outcome. You asked, how will we know that we have this organization? But you really didn't ask, what do you want to walk away with? What is the measurable?
I did, but it was vague, and that's what screwed me up. Because I said, what do
Okay.
you want to walk away with? And he said something like what gets on the calendar is what gets on the like that his hard obligations and his soft commitments, like that they're all important. And I remember writing down when he said that, well, what gets on your calendar, like really early on. And I think if I asked that in the beginning, my conversation would have went a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. So I missed that. I didn't hear you say that. I didn't hear him say specifically. I heard the how will you know part,
Yeah.
but I didn't really hear like what was like the specific outcome. My impression was that he was talking about the calendar, like making the negotiables more non-negotiable. But that's not a specific outcome, right? So, okay, so if that's what he said the outcome was, then that's that's where the more questions have to come in.
Okay. Yeah. And I knew that. And I don't know why I felt like I didn't need to go deeper. I think not that I was worried about time. I personally couldn't get centered. And I felt like I didn't get out of my head until probably 15, 20 minutes into it. Like I felt myself getting really like dialed in, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the, we talk about the coaching agreement a lot in my classes. The coaching agreement is what's really important and can determine the rest of your conversation. And since I'm up into this 3.4, so needs to address. So at one point you asked, where's the best place for us to start? And that is the 5.3 invites client's choice, but that is not the what do we need to address. So that could be something like, what do you think we need to address in order to get you to that outcome? Or what do we need to cover? Or what do we need to talk about? Like getting very specific of what they think the issue is. So make sure that that you ask that question as well, just to get those, all 4 pieces of the coaching agreement. And this is something that, as you would think as experienced coaches that the coaching agreement is like the first thing that we kind of nail down, but it's not. Actually, the more comfortable now this is not everybody, obviously, but the more comfortable you get with coaching and with ongoing clients, for some reason, it's like the less we feel like we need to really nail down that agreement, and it's just not true. It's just something we tell ourselves. But anyway, okay, so that was 3. So I'm gonna call on Holly, and let's look at 4, cultivates trust and safety. Which competence or which markers did you see there?
So be totally honest here. I couldn't find my worksheet, so I was working off of the list that I just found online. So she says, like, what share what you've learned so far, which I felt was a good trust builder, but there were other moments where she was building trust, but I did not write them down.
Okay. So let's get you the worksheet when we're done going through it. But yeah, so for 4 cultivate trust and safety. So 4.1, and again, when you're lost for half of the session, you're not going to hit a lot of these, right? So 4.1 acknowledges talents, insight, and work. You said at the end that he did a great job, but we want you to notice progress throughout, right? You're shaking your head, yeah. So, just halfway through, what is standing out for you that the client has achieved so far in the session, or what have they done really well? What kind of insights, maybe, saying something like, that's really great insight, which Dan had a couple good insights. That could be a way of acknowledging that work. And then you acknowledged expressions. So you were repeating back to him the words and the phrases that he used. So I did like that. And then the invites to respond and accept, you reflected back and asked for confirmation. So we kind of give a half for that, but it's not really inviting. It's like if you make an observation and say make a like a summary, an observation, and say, how does that land for you? What do you think about that? That's more along the line of invite to respond and accept. But I had that as somewhat. The other thing I want to mention is the support, empathy, and concern. So one thing that was missing from this conversation that I want you to think about is that you never asked him how he felt about anything. We're in an emotional intelligence course. You didn't ask him. You didn't ask him how he felt or how that would feel. So especially in your coaching, right? She's laughing. You asked for how important it is to you, right? And when he said that, well, how would it feel having that at the end, right? So, and then of course, throughout, there was other things that he was saying. How does that feel for you, or what's coming up for you emotionally, or, what kind of feelings are coming up? Because there were some, kind of deep things that Dan brought up, right? There was a couple things that I had noted. The biggest one that I saw was when he said, so it was pretty vague in the beginning what he meant, to me anyway, right? And then all of a sudden he said, when it's for somebody else, I'm committed, right? I'm committed when it's about somebody else. But when it's about me, I'm not, right? So definitely lost opportunity there. Ask the questions. The first thing I would have said right there, just as a observer, obviously, but, so then, I heard you just say that you're really committed when it's about somebody else, but when it's about you, you're not so committed. First, ask about the thoughts on that. Like, why do you think that is? And secondly, how does it make you feel knowing that about yourself? Right? Because we can use those emotions with emotional intelligence to help bring the clarity around having to put himself first in certain situations, right? So definitely asking those emotional questions throughout. The conversation is always going to help clients to be more committed and make solid progress in the sessions as well as outside the sessions when we can tie back to the emotions.
And I think I stayed away from like, how does that make you feel? Because that's like my go-to question that I ask way too often. It's like my default. So I was like, I am not asking it that way. And like, then I just didn't ask it at all.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. Like, how does that make you feel is kind of a common question. So a good thing to do is just maybe take note of other ways that you can ask that. Just make a little list. So it kind of sears it into your mind of different ways that you can ask that. But, how does that make you feel is pretty, I mean, it's just an easy question to say. But you could say something like, how does that impact you? What kind of emotions come up for you when you hear that or when you say that? There's different ways to do it, but I definitely get that. Okay. So let's see. So talked about the emotions. So then on 5, maintains presence. You mentioned that you were not present really the first half, and I could see that. I felt like you're a little scattered. But for the time that you were present, like you were on target. You did coach the agenda. You stayed on track with what the coaching agreement was, what you had of it. You did invite client choice. You were curious about Dan, but again, keep in mind the other things that you don't want to let go, like the the being committed. And then even the making myself a priority. I mean, you did say if you couldn't screw it up, what would that look like to you? But remember, sometimes we want to question what the things mean to them. So, well, what does making yourself a priority mean to you? Or what does it do for you? Those type of questions, right? Just kind of exploring a little bit deeper there. So that's more of the curious. You gave enough space. There wasn't really there was no rush. Like I didn't feel like there was any rushing in there, so that was good. You used his language, reflected back in your questions and your reflections. You explored his words, like the soft commitments. You did ask about that. There was no exploring emotions. And there really wasn't any energy shifts in there, but so no exploration there. Exploring perceptions, beliefs, and assumptions. How do you determine what is important? That's a good way to explore the perception there. And then the belief system, like if you couldn't screw it up, what would that look like to you? You didn't interrupt. Let's see. Yeah, you summarized back pretty much. And then for evokes awareness, so questions about current way of thinking. You asked, how do you determine what is important? I think that was a good question. And then the who, explore beyond their current thinking or feeling to a new or expanded. Yeah, we don't have that. And then for the expanding the questions about the topic or the what, I think the making myself a priority falls into that one. If you couldn't screw it up, because we're using the it there, it kind of goes into the what. And then what would that look like? And then outcome would be another thing that you'd want to be non-negotiable. I think that expands it on the outcome that we were assuming was there. you asked, let's see. Oh, that doesn't go there. Oh, you asked, so down to 8.1, you asked, how are we doing so far? So I had that in the wrong spot. Let me take it out of there. You asked, almost all your questions were open-ended. So that was good. You used concise language. The client talked more. You explored progress. The new learning himself, that wasn't really explored. Or the new learning on the focus. And again, that's kind of an easy question. What have you learned about yourself through our conversation? Something like that. And then that leads to how can you apply that? And then you had, so I guess there weren't any actions items. Yeah, okay. You went over what would stop you, so resources and barriers. And then the accountability, what would support you. You told him he did a good job. And then asked how we'd like to close the session. So that was all done. So I would say 8. You've got about half on 8. So that's an area to really think about. And then, the 7 as well for the evokes awareness. So like you said, you're out of practice, and hopefully over the next couple classes, you'll be able to, get back into the swing of it. And, I know your sessions are pretty strong usually, so that's good. And let's see, how do you feel with that feedback, Lori?
Oh, I think it's justified. I definitely see where I could have stepped into stuff. And I think next time I just, I should have done what I always do, is like a centering exercise. Like I thought that I would just be fine. I was like, I got this, no problem. And I should just stick to my routines that I always do. And I deviated. Dan, thanks a lot. I channeled that. No, it's totally fair. And yeah, I think, and I was also thrown off, and I wish I could go back and just explore that whole conversation, even though, well, now that I think about it, I don't know if it's in alignment, but when he mentioned like the trauma with his corporate, like that kind of threw me off. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, does that apply? Do I explore that? Do I not? Like, and I didn't want to go down like a whole road that wasn't part of that, but I probably should have done that in hindsight.
Yeah, I think it's worth a question.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does trauma mean to you? Or, what I hear you saying trauma. How has that affected you, or what does that exactly mean for you? Because sometimes, some people might use words just as like, just as what they define, but not really what the word means. So, it could be something like trauma is like, it was irritating. It was like, stressful. Or it could be trauma like it really affected my psyche, my emotions or whatever. So it's definitely worth asking a question around. Yeah. Okay, good. And then, so Dan, for your end, any questions, or, what are your thoughts?
I think it brought some clarity to like self-awareness, to like the self-respect, to making things non-negotiable. So I mean, it really is a real problem, because I came from a world where it's so different, where when you're in corporate, things are laid out for you. It's here it is, and everything's in a box, and you have to go do X, Y, and Z. And when you become an entrepreneur and you go into your own world, it's very easy not to do something, even if it's for yourself. So it's really something I struggle with. And I think it definitely brought some, talking it through, brought some of that self-awareness of a lot of it. think there was trauma, of being overwhelmed, of burnout, right? And in
Mm.
corporate. And it made me realize, I think the big realization for me is that it's kind of not respecting myself by holding myself to account and doing things. And I think that was my big realization. So I think it was a good conversation to have. I thought it was useful. Definitely.
Good. All right, great, thank you.
Mm.
And then, Holly, actually, if you go into the chat, I think it's continuous chat for all of you. You can scroll up to the previous sessions. There's a feedback form there. No? Yeah, I mark it for everybody, continuous notes, and then I don't know why it doesn't do it. Okay, well, I'll do it then. I'll move it down, but, let's see.
Where is that is it in the course on your platform?
The form, yeah, it's in the drive. On the, if you go into the program level, it's down the
Okay.
bottom into the drive.
Okay. Let's grab it there again. I thought I had downloaded it and then I couldn't find it. And then I was stressed trying to write down the things I was hearing. I was like, oh crap.
No, I hear you. Oh, so give me your thoughts then, Holly, about, just what I went over. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, you've definitely got this nailed down and where each question goes or each part of the conversation. I did feel unsure about the agreement. I'm like, okay, I thought we had a clear agreement, but then as Dan was, further explaining what he wanted, then it got more unclear. And I know that I struggle with that a lot. Nailing down the agreement, making sure that I know exactly what the outcome needs to be and how it's going to be measured.
Mhm.
Because then when I end up at the end of the conversation, I'm like, oh, should we get there? But I love some of the powerful questions. Like, how do you determine what's important? I like where's the best place to start? And that she came back to that a second time when it wasn't clear and just very calmly asked simple questions, one at a time, like not question stacking, which I also tend to do. So, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. All right, I did put that form in the chat if you want to download it from there.
Thank you.
And then, okay, so what I'd like you guys to do, you don't have to follow it, but just get the model, right? The SE coaching model, and just glance through it before your coaching sessions, just so you can get a feel for, especially the agreement, right? Because that's the one that's standing out the most for me. It's like, if you don't have that agreement, the rest of the conversation can get lost. So, at least looking at that can give you some more, direction as you go into your conversations. That's also in the drive and it's also under lesson 1, should be in the uploads for lesson 1. Okay. So let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll get to the lesson. It's just about 7. Let's go to 7:15, and I'll meet you back here. Thanks. Well, All right. All right. So we are on chapter 4 tonight, which is okay, hold on. Put the right one up. The mastering intuition and somatic awareness. How weird that my there it is. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot to coaching, right? So there's not any one thing really that embodies coaching, but you know, a lot of it we deal with is verbal, right? We ask a lot of questions, the client gives us answers, we're listening for those answers, we're listening for feelings, we're listening for cues. But it's also about what's being felt in the session. And as a coach, we really want to be able to tap into our intuition and our somatic awareness that allows us to see what's going on beyond just the words and recognizing what is going on with our clients, both emotionally and physically, because their experience emotionally is, you know, is a big part of coaching. Even if we don't use the emotional, like the words that go with emotional intelligence, we don't use that language with the client, we're still looking at how things make them feel, how their body feels, where things are going on in their head, their stomach, their, you know, the tension, just all these things that are going on. And when we learn to kind of sense underlying emotions, or feel like any kind of energy shifts, or we can see any kind of body, you know, language or cues, we're able to get deeper and help them get more awareness around what's going on for them, which ultimately helps them to have better transformation, quicker transformation, but ultimately something that's going to be, you know, advantageous to them. So there's a connection between intuition, somatic awareness, and emotional intelligence. Because emotional intelligence is the foundation that supports a whole ton of things, but definitely intuition and somatic awareness. In coaching, we're able to say that the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more emotionally aware you are of yourself and what's going on to people around you, the more attuned you become to your own internal signals, which helps you to become in tune with your clients' signals and helps them to become more in tune, right? Because you know, even though we're not teachers in our coaching sessions, our questions can open up a whole lot of awareness around things that kind of gives the signals to clients, right? It brings about awareness without us having to teach or tell them what's going on, but our questions give them little insights because we're having the intuition to ask a particular question that's going to help bring about awareness or insight. So, so the highlighted areas for each chapter, we're highlighting the EQ sub areas that go with the topics that we're talking about. So in this topic that we want to kind of highlight for the EQ sub areas are emotional self-awareness, empathy, emotional expression, reality testing, flexibility, and interpersonal relationships. So that's what we're going to focus in on, those key sub areas. So how does emotional intelligence enhance intuition and somatic awareness? Well, first of all, we have self-awareness, which is a sub area, emotional self-awareness. And this just basically is the more that we understand our own emotions, the better we can differentiate between real like intuitive insight and personal bias. And bias is a big deal with coaches. It's something that we have to kind of own a lot of the times, is that we have our own bias. And if we work hard at it, we can eliminate a lot of it. But we're human and we're going to have, there's still going to be bias there. And so when we're able to become more self-aware and understand our own emotions, that opens up more insight into some personal bias that we might still have, and allows us to work on it, right? Allows us to see it, recognize it, and work on it. The next way is the interpersonal awareness. So that's where we're looking at empathy. And that just means that we're recognizing those nonverbal cues and emotional energy in clients that allows us to pick up on what's not being said. Because a lot of times we get a whole lot more out of what's not being said than what's coming out of people's mouths, right? So when we're really in tune, we're highly in tuned into the person that we're speaking to. We can see or sense when something's missing, right? And we can sense when something's unsaid, either intentionally or sometimes the awareness just isn't there for the client. So it's not, it's unintentional. It's not really intentional. But when we're able to pick up on those things, it enhances both intuition and the, kind of attuning the somatic with the client. And the best way to kind of think of this is when you hear a client say something to you and you just know, like you have that feeling in your gut that there should be something else there, right? Or maybe we sense a fear and we kind of intuitively think they're afraid to say something here, right? This is our empathy enhanced and being able to pick up things that the client isn't saying. So when we sense that, we sense either a fear that they haven't said something that maybe it's something that they think would offend us, or something that they're not willing to admit yet to themselves, or there's a whole different reasons for that. But when we hear it, we can then ask a question, or when we don't hear it, sorry, we can then ask a question around, I feel like there's something there that you haven't really said, or was there something else that you wanted to add to that, or something along those lines. But just asking a question because you've noticed. I noticed that you stopped suddenly there. Was there something else that you were thinking? Was there something else that you wanted to say? Just a question, when you pick up on it, to have the client sit with it a minute. They may choose not to answer, and that's okay, but you've given them the opportunity. You've picked up on it, and now you've given them that opportunity. That also helps if they're not aware of it. That helps to bring awareness. So now they see that you've seen it, you're questioning something, and then they can look inside and they can potentially pick up on something, and it enhances their own intuition at that point because they're able to examine it now. Where a lot of people will just let those things go. Right? You're talking to somebody, and you can see that there's something there that they're just not saying, or something there that might upset them. And you just don't say anything, right? It gets passed by and nothing gets acknowledged or worked through or what have you. But as coaches, we want to be different in that way. We want to help the client to really look into it and pick up on it. And it's really our empathy that drives this. So empathy is like a real, I hate to say a core skill because a lot of them are core skills, but it's tough to be a good coach if you don't have empathy. It's just, you're just going to miss so much. And so it's a lot easier to acknowledge. If you have to improve empathy, you can improve empathy, right? All of emotional intelligence can be improved. It's not like IQ where you were born with a certain amount and it never changes. EQ, you can always develop. And then the next area there is this is self-expression, and that's a sub area of emotional expression. And this is where we, we're able to encourage clients to tune into their bodily sensations and then articulate their feelings with more depth based on what they're feeling in their body. Now, I will say that not everybody is going to be what people call a somatic coach, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. But we can all bring about more awareness and help the clients to see things just by, again, checking your gut, checking tension behind the eyes, or, if they have headaches or anything like that. There's like simple things that are, that the body reacts to that we can question without being said, like, I'm a somatic coach or I'm doing somatic coaching. No, we're creating awareness in the body with emotional intelligence and with the questions that we ask. So we want to encourage them, especially if there's fear or anxiety type things going on, to ask them where do they feel it and help them to relieve it. Because sometimes if it's that lump in your stomach and they just can't go any further with it, it's stopping the coaching, conversation. It's stopping progress. So even if you can just say something as simple as, where are you feeling that? Well, I feel like this big lump in my stomach. How can we get rid of that? How can we alleviate that right now? Maybe it's deep breathing. Maybe it's, some tension exercises or something. Because if that lump is there in their stomach while you're talking to them, how much awareness are they really getting out of the session? How much progress are they really making? Because that is something that they're thinking about. They're not only feeling it, but they're thinking about it as well. You can't not think about it when you have that type of, I'm just going to use the word anxiety. I don't mean it in the mental health way, but when you have that, I can't think of another word, but when you have that kind of anxiety because you have that lump in your stomach, it's hard to get past anything at that point. So just some things that we want to help them to first sense in their bodies, and then to articulate how they're feeling with it, and then how to remove it, obviously. And then the last one there for how it enhances is decision making, which is a sub area of reality testing. And this is where it kind of helps you assess whether your insights are actually grounded in the client's reality rather than assuming, right? We don't ever want to assume, especially as coaches. So when we're able to do that reality testing, we can see, is my intuition correct? Is it really based on what the client's feeling or what their reality is? Or is it more about what I'm feeling or what, my reality is? And so we don't want to assume for the client. When we have that, we're able to ask the questions that will allow them or allow us to make sure that they are clear about their reality and that we are clear that we're on the same page. That's basically around what it's around. Making sure we're on the same page, because the next decision is to ask that next question. And so we want to make sure that we're really clear on that before we ask the following question. So those are just some ways to look at how we can enhance our intuition in the and somatic awareness in our coaching and for the client. So the next section there, how does somatic awareness strengthen emotional intelligence? So there's several ways that it does that. One of the main things I think, for me anyway, and it could be different for everybody, is when you notice and you can name a physical response, whether it's, you notice that their breath changed, like they're breathing quicker, or they sighed, they exhaled, or they slump, or maybe they cross their legs or they cross their arms. When you notice those things, the physical responses, and then you talk about it, you say something about it, you can help the clients become more emotionally self-aware. Because sometimes with those things are unconscious, almost, right? Like something's bothering you, and so you fold your arms. And this could be a sign of a lot of things. It could be irritation, it could be um, you know, um, not anxiety, but like questioning, could be like questioning how you're feeling or questioning the context of the conversation. Could be a lot of different things. So when you see those types of cues, we want to be able to ask about it, notice it. So you notice it, you name it, and then you ask a question around it. This is going to help the client become more self-aware, because when you ask that question about, I noticed that you just crossed your arms, what was going through your mind? So now they can connect whatever they were thinking to crossing their arms, which is an action that closes off people, right? It closes off people around them, and it closes off your own thoughts when you cross your arms. So we're able to help them increase their emotional self-awareness, which strengthens their EQ. The second one there is clients who feel disconnected from their emotions. They often experience emotional expression through body language first. Because they're disconnected, they're not able to verbalize it. They're not able to speak about it too clearly anyway. Because there's just not the awareness. So they're not, and even sometimes when there's awareness of what they think might be going on, they don't have the language for it. So the body piece usually comes first, that body language. So if we can help them to recognize their body signal, it can help them to become, again, more self-aware, and also realize how they are already self-expressing their emotions and how they can change that if it's needed. So if it's negative, if they're expressing them negatively a lot, we can help them to be aware of that and express them in a positive way. And then the third one there is encouraging clients to process emotions through the body. So noticing where they hold tension strengthens their stress tolerance and their emotional regulation. So kind of really looking at the first two and putting it all together. Just asking clients simple questions. How does that make you feel? Where do you feel that in your body? What is that feeling blocking for you? What is that feeling doing to your perception of this situation? Or how is that feeling influencing your decision? Things like that. Once we can help them identify where it is that they're feeling it in their body, we can then ask those types of questions that helps them to see where that stress tolerance is, or where that stress is in their body, and to build up some more tolerance and regulate those emotions. But again, they're going to feel it in their body first, and then we can bring the vocabulary and the questions around it. Okay, and then, so I have an example there. A client is struggling with decision making, and they appear tense and they keep crossing their arms. Instead of asking what's stopping you from making a choice, you might say, I notice your tension in your shoulders. What is your body telling you right now? And this allows the client to explore emotions before intellectualizing them. And it can be, again, very simple question that, and then silence to allow them to answer, to really look at and feel it before they answer the question. Okay. The next section there, the role of intuition in coaching. So, I mean, intuition is a big part of coaching. We don't want to guess things, but there are, we are intuitive to a certain extent in our observations, in what we need to ask our clients, what we're noticing about the clients. There's some things that we have to kind of go with our gut, and we want to kind of determine what is the role there of intuition. So it's often, again, described as like a sense or knowing something without really, like without the client telling us, without concrete evidence. But it's the ability to pick up on something, whether that's an unspoken emotion, whether it's an energy shift, whether it's deeper meaning, whether it's surface meaning, something about what the client is trying to say and maybe not able to say. There's lots of things that we can pick up on in our intuition. And sometimes intuition can feel abstract, and some people don't know how to describe it and they don't know how to enhance it. But it is a skill that can be developed. And that's basically by practicing, becoming aware of our own emotions and our own feelings and thoughts, and being able to reflect as much as possible with the client and in ourselves, reflection, self-reflection as well. So these are the things that can help us to build our intuition when we feel like it might be abstract. And that might be as simple as saying, I noticed that you took a deep breath there, or you exhaled pretty loudly there, or extended breath. I feel like that might have been, because you felt such and such about what you just said. What are your thoughts on that? Anytime you make the observation, then you're asking the client to respond to it without any attachment. So what are your thoughts on that? And then that can help you to see, well, the client can say, yeah, you know what, that's exactly what it was. And that validates you. Not that we're looking for validation, but as you're growing as a coach, and you're growing your intuition, you need to know if you're right or wrong, right? So that's a way to do that without it being about you being right or wrong, if that makes sense. So we're not trying to show the client that we're all knowing or anything, but sometimes we have to validate it for ourselves in order to take the conversation, take the next step in the conversation that makes sense for the client, because that's what we're trying to do, right? Everything is geared towards the client. So how does intuition enhance coaching? It helps you identify what's not being said. It allows you to sense when a client's holding back. It enables you to ask deeper, more resonant questions. And it strengthens your ability to trust your instincts while staying client-centered. And that's a big thing, to trust your instincts, because I've seen, just because I've mentored, a lot of ACC coaches, which are typically those beginner coaches, first year, and they don't have the confidence, and so they don't trust their instincts, and they miss opportunities with clients. And that's what we're talking about basically throughout this whole course, is really shortening the number of missed opportunities that we have because we're creating all this awareness for ourselves and for our clients. So how do you develop intuition as a coach? Well, you can practice deep listening. That's just basically focusing on what the client says, how they say it, and what is being left unsaid. Staying curious. So instead of dismissing a gut feeling, like I said a second ago, just explore it with the client through open-ended questions and maybe a reflection back. Pause before responding. So give yourself space to check in with your intuition before asking the next question. So, a big part of growing as a coach is really leaning into the silence and giving your client space, but it's also giving yourself space. So that we're not just asking question after question after question. We're asking questions that are going to have the biggest impact on our clients. And then reflecting on past sessions. So a good practice is actually to record some sessions, keep them for 30 days and then get rid of them. You have to have kind of a policy around it to follow our ethics. You can ask clients, can I record our sessions and then I'll get rid of them after 30 days? It's just for my own advancement, or, whatever. Sometimes it's for your mentor coach or whatever it is, right? But as long as you have a policy for yourself and you let the client know, a good practice is to record your sessions and then listen to them and see, was I right there? I had a feeling that was going on with the client. Did I ask the right question to find out if that was correct? Again, it's not about us being right. It's about how to proceed after that, right? So did I ask a good follow-up question to what I thought was going on? Did the client validate that? So just observing your sessions. You can also obviously use it with your mentor coach as well. In this case, myself, and have a check-in, right? So reflect on your past sessions, consider moments when your intuition was accurate and how it kind of guided the session. How did it enhance the session? How did the client respond to that intuition? How did you respond to the intuition? Things along those lines. So an example I have here is that a coach senses hesitation in a client's voice despite them saying they're fine about a situation. But instead of moving on, the coach follows their intuition and asks, I hear you're saying you're fine, but I also sense something else underneath. What else is present for you right now? So this just allows the client to think for a second, right? And go a little bit deeper into their emotions. And they might pick up something that they hadn't initially recognized from your observation there. And then the coaching tip here is just basically intuition isn't magic. It's really a pattern of recognition that's filtered through empathy and presence. So you can increase intuition by increasing empathy, increasing your presence as well. The next part there is a question so far. Let's stop there for a second. No? Okay. So the next piece there is somatic awareness. So reading the body signals. And this is just basically somatic awareness is the ability to recognize how emotions and thoughts manifest in the body, both in yourself and for your client. So since emotions are stored and expressed physically, paying attention to breath, posture, tone, energy shifts, all those can provide some valuable insights. And there's a little chart here. These are some common cues that you can look for in coaching. The shallow breathing, and these are possible meanings. It's not set in stone, but typically it's hesitation or anxiety when you notice shallow breathing. And when you notice it, it could be something as simple as saying, I notice your breathing changed just now. What's happening for you in this moment? The crossing arms or leaning back, that's discomfort, resistance, usually a negative emotion. I sense some hesitation there. What's coming up for you? Tightening the jaw or tension in the jaw or clenched fists or any kind of tension, tightening that you see that is, noticeable. Maybe it's the temples as well. Sometimes you'll see the temples, the veins in the temples popping out. It's the same thing there. Usually it means suppressed emotions. So they're holding back something. And you can say, what does your body want to express right now? Or what do you think your body is trying to express right now? And then energized or leaning forward. So, just somebody like talking very animated and leaning forward and, having a big conversation on their end. It's like bigger. It might be louder, but sometimes it doesn't have to be louder, but that's usually excitement or engagement. And you can say, I see a shift in your energy. What feels alive for you right now? Or what is going on for you right now emotionally? What are you feeling? So different ways to ask that question. So those are just some examples. And again, these are examples you need to use your language, your observation as you see it to guide you, but this can give you a good starting point. So by noticing and naming the physical cues, you invite the client to explore their emotions more deeply without imposing meaning on their experience. That's the other thing, is that we don't want to assume what that means to them. We want to be able to, like, the emotion that we see, we don't want to assume what that emotion means to them, because emotions are very personal. Even though we have these headings of like standard emotions, how they impact people and their meaning for people are different. Everybody has their own, little slight variation piece of it. So we always want to make sure that we're asking the questions and that we're not assuming or imposing meaning on any kind of experience that they're having. So looking at these, the physical cues and the possible meanings, what are some other responses to these examples? So, you have somebody that's, breathing shallow, you're picking up on anxiety or hesitation, what is a response that you might have for that? Anybody?
I mean, it could be as simple as I noticed a shift. I noticed a shift in your body language just now. What's happening? What are you thinking? One of the things that comes to mind for me is that a lot of times I'm working with people that might not be aware, like you said, they're cut off from their body, and so they might not have the language to or think that they are expressing anything, so they don't want to share potentially, or they don't know how to share.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's definitely can be the case. And so that's something where you maybe have to get a little bit more specific. So you could say something like I noticed your breath got faster right there, or I noticed you exhaled for a longer period of time. Like, be very specific about what you're seeing, so they then can start connecting that to what the next question you're going to ask, which is like whatever that is for you. So it might be, what do you think that could mean? Like, if you're feeling like they don't have too much awareness around it, you could say, what do you think that might mean? And then based on their answer, ask a couple more questions to kind of start peeling back the layers, go down, down on the questions to get them a little bit more clearer. Sometimes you might have to ask a question like, can you remember a previous time that you've done that it was pretty prevalent, right? Like, where you kind of exhale, and what kind of emotions were going on for you at that time. So sometimes we might have to connect it to something else,
Mhm.
depending on what you know about them.
That's
Good.
helpful.
Yeah.
Cheryl,
about that
question.
Yeah.
Quick question. So, like, when you get to like those questions, right? Like where it's like anxiety driven, usually it's either like fear or uncertainty. There's something there. Like, is it fair to bring up, things like that? Like, is there something you're uncertain about or fear, and like use those words without them using them? Because usually they're correlated to certain things, right? Like, usually that anxiety is stemming from something, like
Yeah.
that fear. So is it fair to do that? And or is that kind of like, because it could be something else? So it's like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think that falls back to, we don't want to put words into the client's mouth, right? So we
Mhm.
want them to use their own language. So we don't want to put a term to it. We don't want to say anxiety, uncertainty, but it depends really a lot on the conversation as well. But typically you can just say, I hear a shift, or I see a difference, or something like that. What would you say is happening? And let them try to explain it. And then if they need language around it, they'll typically ask you. And then you might give a couple choices and say, well, do you think it's more this or that? Or, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't
Okay.
do that first. I wouldn't, it's kind of introducing language. We don't ever want to introduce
Right.
language.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, good
All right.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome. How about the crossing arms or leaning back? What's something that you could ask there? What would your response be?
I think I would say something along the lines of, I noticed that the way that you're sitting, I just had it in my brain and I just lost it. I might even just be bold and say, most people would take your body language right now as being closed off. Would you say that that's true?
I don't know that I would say that, but
How
that's
would you
me.
say that?
I would say, I noticed that you crossed your arms.
Okay.
What does that mean to you?
Mm.
Or what brought you to cross your arms? What were you thinking when you crossed your arms? What were you feeling? Like, there's different ways to ask that question, right? And if they say nothing, like it was nothing, you might say something like, I just want to explore this for a second, because typically crossing the arms and leaning back is kind of like a disconnect, disconnection between what we're talking about and your feelings or whatever. What are your thoughts on that? Then you can maybe go a little bit further, but I like from the beginning just saying, I noticed this. What are your thoughts on it? Again, we don't want to, the problem with saying what you said is that could potentially insult them. And so we want to just be careful we don't insult people.
That's what came up for me. Like when you say that, because then you're saying, well, what do you mean I'm uneasy? Right. And then people like, and I've
They
had
get
that happen
defensive.
where people get defensive and they're like, well, why are you judging me? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not uncertain. I'm not. Right. And then it's like, right. Because then you're
Yeah.
into another, they're assuming. Right. And then,
Right. And that's the problem, right? Because we don't want to insult clients and we don't want to have to, I'm not saying that we have to tiptoe around them, but we want to put it back on them. So we want them to identify it, name it. We don't want to give our language or our thoughts on the subject, right? Because it's not about our thoughts, it's about what the client thinks it is. So by asking them, they could turn around and say, well, I crossed my arms because I'm cold. Or, there could be, you have to ask them. And then, yeah, we don't want to make assumptions because that can make people feel like they're being judged. We definitely don't want to be judgmental, right? So that's a good thought. People can get very defensive about that. How about the tightening jaw or clenched fist or any kind of other tension that you're seeing in the face or the body? And this might be a closed-ended question. There's definitely open-ended questions. What are you feeling right now? I noticed some tension in your your jaw. I noticed that you're clenching your jaw. What are you thinking about right now? Or what are you feeling right now?
I think even a question of, are you aware of? Because
Yeah.
sometimes people aren't even aware of their body language. Like I've caught myself like being on camera and it's like, oh, right. So maybe even ask them like, are you aware of, Phil, are you aware you're crossing your arms? And then, what's kind of explore that a little bit, just asking like what they're doing and let them kind of, just making them aware of it.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely one way to do it. But also remember that when you're asking about that action, if they're not aware of it, they're most likely they might deny it first or say there's no significance. And so you have to follow it up with another question. But I will say that if you have somebody ongoing and like you sense it more than once that their jaw clenches on certain subjects, you can definitely, when you see it, say, I notice that when we talk about such and such, your jaw tenses. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's like, okay, so they say, oh, well, I don't think that's, whatever or whatever. Could it be that you're just not aware that happens? So there's ways around it so that we're not assuming or we're not putting our thoughts onto them or our language onto them. So you want to ask those open-ended questions first. Okay, so the tip here is reflecting somatic cues can help clients reconnect to emotions they've intellectually bypassed. Okay, so this is a little exercise. We have time for this? Yeah. That we're going to do. So the first, the objective, it's a embodied awareness practice. So it strengthens awareness of nonverbal cues in coaching. It develops the ability to observe, describe, and interpret shifts in body language, energy, and emotions. And it's practice giving and receiving real-time feedback in a supportive group setting. So we're going to do we're not going to take as long as this does, though. I don't think that that's going to work. But this is something that you can do, outside of class, especially if you can do some of this with clients. You can do it in group settings. there are different ways that you can do this, but basically what I want you all to do real quick is to close your eyes. And I want you to do a quick body scan. So notice any tension, emotional sensations, maybe relaxation or ease, both positive and negative. Just notice what's going on with your body right now. And think about typically, where do you hold stress in your body? And then how does your body feel when you experience different emotions, anxiety, confidence, frustration, so negative and positive? Because those two things, breathe as well, take some deep breaths in and out. Those two things, awareness in yourself is definitely going to help you with awareness in others. Okay, so where do you think you hold stress in your body, Dan?
Definitely like neck and shoulders for me. And it's like whenever I feel like that neck pain, when I start to feel that, I definitely feel like that's where definitely tension related or stress related.
Okay. How about how does your body feel when you like have confidence? So versus stress. Where do you feel that in your body?
I think it's when I feel strong. And that's like I think where I always go back to fitness. Like when I feel strong and like I think it's all connected. When I'm consistent on my routines, I feel strong. I'm get my butt to the gym and doing what I'm supposed to be doing and eating right. And I think I'm not sure if there's a specific place, but it's definitely that overall feeling. It's definitely, confidence and strong and, I feel like I'm doing the right things. So.
Yeah. Okay. Lori, how about you? Where do you think you experience stress most in your body? Or hold it, I should say.
Yeah, definitely neck, shoulders, but I also clench my jaw.
Okay, so
And I
you
think
know that.
it's a response of like not wanting to talk. So I don't say something that I'm going to regret.
Okay, it's good to know that. How do you think your body feels when you experience the confidence, like positive things?
It's heart-centered for sure. Like I feel it's like a heart expansion.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I get that excitement feeling all in
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to get out.
Yeah.
How about you, Holly? Where do you think you hold stress in your body?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Definitely in the shoulders and the neck and in that area. But I noticed that I do the same thing when I'm afraid I'm going to say something, or when I want to hold back, I purse my lips.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then same open-heartedness when I'm feeling strong, when I'm feeling like happy or excited. It's an opening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So it's weird. I feel stress in my stomach. I don't typically feel it in this area. Although sometimes I get backaches, but basically I think it's coming from my stomach that I'm getting the backaches. But I feel it. I just feel it in my stomach and sometimes my chest as well. But good awareness. How about we're not gonna do the second one there. Let's go down to page 6, the engage and reflect scenarios. So the first scenario is like the hesitant client. So your client says they feel fine about a difficult decision, but their posture is tense. They keep avoiding eye contact. How do you explore that with them? So some reflective questions, reflection questions, what nonverbal cues suggest there may be more beneath the surface? So we talked about already the posture's tense, and they're avoiding eye contact. What else would we look for nonverbal cues? Yeah, the cross on the arms.
I also look for like people fidgeting.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I do that sometimes. That's anxiety for me. If you see me doing this with my hands, it's anxiety. I don't know if you can see it, but this is
Mhm.
like Mike
Same.
knows to come over. Ask me if everything's okay when he sees me doing that with my hands. Sometimes it's boredom, but a lot of the time it's, it's anxiety. But yeah, fidgeting, arms crossing. So how could you use your oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say like sometimes people will literally turn their back to you. Like if you're not on a
Yeah.
Zoom call, if you're in person, like they'll kind of try to get away from you if they don't want to talk to you or they have a problem or something.
Yeah, something, if they're feeling something strongly, they don't want anybody to see it or get questioned about it. Yeah. Okay, so how do you use your intuition to explore their true feelings without leading them when you do see something like that? So you see somebody fidgeting and you feel like that's a hesitation or that's kind of like an anxiety. How do you use your intuition to explore that feeling with them? Anybody?
Well, I think I would just first ask, like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Right? And kind of like engage and see what response I get from that. And, you know, based on the tone of the answer, you could kind of understand where they're going, and that'll lead you down a different pathway sometimes.
Yeah, that could be. Somebody have something different?
I mean, if they've
think-
already,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if they've already said they're fine, then that's where I mean, I would just know to call out, well, oh, well, I noticed you were, your posture was a little slumped over. Is there anything to that? And then they have the opportunity to say that they're fine again, which I can see totally happening. So I don't know what the deeper question is without confronting them and saying, I don't believe you're fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we definitely don't want to say that.
No,
But yeah, so they say they're fine. About the decision that they made. We know that they're not fine about it. And you could say something simply, I know you said you're fine about making that decision, but what I noticed is that your body kind of got slumped and your jaw clenched. And I'm wondering what that might mean for you.
I
Something
would
like
say,
that.
I would say too, like, through my experience, like to normalize it, right? Like helping them understand, like, hey, we all have rough days, or, kind of like setting, like, just making people feel that you're not trying to call them out on something, like normalize it first. Like we all have rough days. Is there anything going on today in particular that's, really bothering you? Or, kind of normalize it first, just kind of setting that we all have rough days and kind of, meet them where they're at. So
Yeah, no, that's a good example. So in this example, though, they've said they fine after a difficult decision. So you could say
Mhm.
something like, I understand that those type of decisions can be very stressful, or it's very normal to feel stressful after making that kind of decision. And I noticed that your hands are fidgeting. What kind of emotions might you be feeling right now? Again, it's just about you becoming aware and helping the client to become aware that there's something that you're seeing, you know, in their body or in their facial expression or in the way that they're breathing or what have you. But yeah, good example there. And then, you know, that was part of the third one there, the deeper question as well. The second scenario is the energy shift. So during a session, your client starts speaking more rapidly and gesturing more than usual. You sense a mix of excitement and nervousness. Some reflection questions like, what might that energy shift indicate? You know, there's positive and negative things that could be. Depending on the conversation, it could be excitement to get moving towards whatever it is that you guys are talking about, and maybe the action items that the client has come up with. It could be more nervousness, so they're trying to they sense that there's some emotion coming up, or they sense that some kind of, maybe it's and I'll just give you a quick example. I was on a call a few weeks ago, and I actually felt like I was going to be emotional in the call. And so I started talking faster to get, just to get through it. And so that I didn't become emotional. But what people don't realize, and what I knew anyway, was that is an emotional response right there. So when you are talking faster, people are noticing that. They're noticing that there's something going on. So it's helpful to help the client see that as well. But yeah, it could be positive or negative in that case. So how can you reflect this observation without assuming what's going on? What could you say?
So I noticed you got a little more animated there, or it would depend on who I was talking to. I wouldn't necessarily use the word vibe, but that something to that effect, like there was again a shift in your energy, or something to that effect. Because
Yeah.
it could be positive or negative. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, I noticed that you got excited there. I noticed that, your energy shifted. What was that about? Some people respond to things like, it depends on who you're talking to, right? Because some people will respond to what was that about, or what about that is, do you notice, or something like that? Or you can just say, what does that mean to you? Or what does that reaction mean for you? So some people will react again. So is it nervousness or is it excitement? So we can say, when you do that, like when you get whatever, when you're talking fast, or when you're doing this, or when you're doing that, or when you have those energy shifts, what does that mean for you? Like, what's happening for you in those moments? Because I don't know, right? You want to make it come from a perspective of, I'm trying to find out what that means or not, and let me know, right? So we're not assuming, we're asking them for clarification without saying, you can give me clarification. So that's another way, is to take a hands-off approach and not assume, we don't want to assume anyway, but just be able to put it all onto them to really notice what it is and explain it to us. So there are different ways that you can approach that. Okay, so then the next section, integrating intuition and somatic awareness in coaching. So to effectively put these together, there's things like naming what you notice without assigning meaning. Again, we're not going to assume anything. We're going to make sure that the client has the opportunity to name it, define it, describe it. So there's some examples here. I noticed your posture shifted just now. What happened for you in that moment? Or what were you feeling in that moment? And then trusting your instinct while staying non-directive, non-assumptive. So something tells me there's more to explore here. What else is present for you right now? Or what else is coming up for you right now? And sometimes it's not, sometimes it's more, instead of saying something's telling me there's more to explore, you could say, I'm feeling like there might be more to explore, depending on the relationship that you have with the client. because when you're working with somebody the first session or the second session, you might not be as forward, right? As you get to know each other more, you might be able to be a little bit more direct, like something's telling me there's more here. And then the third one, they're encouraging clients to check in with their body. Again, like if your body could speak right now, what would it say? Or how does your body typically react when you feel this? What do you notice about your body when you feel excited? What do you notice in your body when you feel stressed? Those are types of questions that you can help the client to think about because they might not know it. And then they kind of think about it. And then that brings awareness, right? And then they can start noticing it more because you've brought attention to it. So by refining our skills in this area, we definitely create more in-depth attuned coaching, right? We get more in tune to our clients, we're more present, and it helps with greater insight and then also transformation for the client, which is the ultimate goal. So there's a reflection prompt in this chapter. Think back to a time when you sent something in a client beyond their words. How did you respond? What would you do differently next time? And if you reflect, again, something to consider when you reflect on things like this, either by listening to recordings or maybe you take notes and you notice it later after a session. What do you take from that? And how do you either get deeper next time or, not assume next time or, depending on what happened. Or maybe even you need to pull back a little bit more. Maybe it's it was too much the way you asked a question because sometimes we can overwhelm clients emotionally. So it's a sometimes it's a balancing act, but always err on the side of being direct with the client and leaving it up to the client to name and define. And don't put that on us because that's not our place in that conversation. Okay. Questions about any of that? All right.
No, that's super helpful.
Good. I'm glad. All right. So what I'm going to do is I do want to go over the model just so you can see how how it flows with the markers, which is what we followed when we created the model. So let me share my screen. Okay, so there's basically 10 pieces to this model, and it's setting the stage, reviewing goals and progress, structuring the agreement, engagement and exploration, active listening and reflection, awareness generation, challenging and encouraging, action planning, supporting client growth, and closing the session. And actually, before we do this, I'd like to get what your biggest takeaway from today's session was when we're looking at increasing or looking at the empathy, the somatic awareness, and presence. So let's do that first, and then we'll go into this. So I'm just going to go down, Lori.
I really like the whole somatic part of it. For me, that's like a good reminder. I wish I would have done that at the beginning of my call for me to do my check-in like I always did, and I didn't think about doing that. And typically I'll invite the client to do the same. And so I really like that for them, instead of just asking like, is there anything you need to clear, anything you need to chat about before we get started, like to kind of check in with their energy level is something I really like. So thanks for that reminder.
Good, thank you. Holly?
I liked how much you focused on making sure that you don't name what you think they're feeling.
Yeah, it can be important to kind of bring up to the forefront because it's just so easy. And you might be really good at it. Like if you have high empathy, you might have a really good, like 99.9% sure what they're feeling, but there's that 0.1%, right? And we don't want to trip over that. Dan, how about you?
I like the part about exploring exploring the emotions, like with the body language and gut intuition. I think it's really interesting that there's consistency, that it means something, right? And it's up to us to explore what it means and help the client to determine what that means to them. So I think it's really interesting to to pick up on that body language and then to really kind of deep dive in exploring, you know, it kind of lands to me like the body language is kind of like a trigger. Now let's figure out, or a signal, I guess is a better
Yeah.
word. And then to explore, what's behind it. So I'm just very intrigued by that.
Yeah, and that's a good metaphor or whatever that would be analogy. I like that. So trigger or I don't think I like the trigger. I think, what was the second one you said?
Symbol, or like
Yeah,
a
a
or
signal.
signal,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Like,
I like that. Yeah,
I
okay,
think
good.
trigger is probably a bad word. I think it probably doesn't land so
I think it
well.
has negative connotations. People might not like that. But okay,
Agreed.
great. Yeah, I love that. Thanks. Okay, so let's go over this. So the first part, setting the stage, is just basically opening your conversation, right? So thanks for being here today, or however you're going to do this. This is obviously your language, whatever you would do. How are you feeling? Are you ready for our session, or is there anything you need to clear before we get started? And something that's going to give you a cue to start the session. A good way to get a session started is just, especially in the beginning, is to remind them that your session is a safe place or a judgment-free zone or whatever it is that you would use, especially if you have somebody that's nervous. And in the beginning stages of working with you, the first, second, maybe even third session, depending on the person. And then letting them know that you take notes if you do take notes. Again, just a courtesy, and remember that note taking can take away your presence. So you want to go light on the note taking and do more like bullet points. The more you do that, the less you'll have to do it in the end. And if you're recording this session, you don't typically have to take notes. You can run it through AI and get a transcript or what have you, versus having to take the notes, because that takes away from your presence. But if you're going to take them, make sure that you're letting them know. If it's an ongoing client, you're going to review the goals and progress from previous sessions. So just like, last time you committed to doing such and such, how did you make out with that? Have you celebrated progress? What got in the way? Or how can we remove that? Something, if they weren't able to complete it because of obstacles, then you want to just take a minute and talk through that. See if that's something that they want to discuss on the call as well. They can always bring up those obstacles, especially if it was action items that they're really excited to take. And so maybe they would bring that up as a topic as well. So just to think of, something to think about along those lines. And then structuring your agreement. Again, this is the competency 3. So using open-ended questions to explore the topic. So what would you like to focus on in today's session? You can ask that any way you want, but what would be most helpful to explore together? What's important for us to work on in today's session? What would you like to think about today? And then ask the second question is what the client would like to achieve and how it will be measured. So what specifically would you like to walk away with at the end of the session? How will we know you've achieved that? That gives you your topic, your outcome, and your measurement. There's some other options here. What specifically would you like to walk away with? How will you know this session's been successful? What will make you feel this time has been well spent? Different things along those lines. I will say that don't use measurement questions. You don't want to bring up the measurement. You want them to define it. So I know a lot of coaches will kind of default to that on a scale of 1 to 10, kind of a thing. We want the clients to determine any kind of scales or anything that's going to have a measurement to it. We don't want to determine that for them. And then active listening and reflective techniques to deepen understanding. So you're just reflecting back. What I hear you saying is you'd like to focus on whatever that topic is. And at the end of the session, you'd like to have whatever that is. And then just getting that confirmation. And then asking the meaning. So what will achieving the goal mean to you, or what will change for you when you've accomplished this goal? How is it important to you now? For what purpose do you want to achieve this? Any way you want to ask that question, but we're checking in with what is the meaning for them? And then allowing them to lead the session. Where would you like to start? And then we have engagement and exploration. So we're just exploring the current situation. What specifically about this challenge or situation is a problem for you right now? What have you learned from trying to solve it so far? Just engaging in the current reality. So how is the situation impacting you? What's different about this situation from others where you were successful? Of course, there's a ton of other questions to ask, but these are ways to look at the current situation and the reality around it. And then active listening and reflection. So you want to challenge any limiting beliefs or assumptions that you hear throughout the session. So what belief do you hold that might be stopping you from moving forward? What is making you think that that is true? Encourage them to look at alternative perspectives or solutions. So what would really help you to look at this situation differently? Again, different ways to ask those type of questions, but we want to make sure that we're hearing what's going on, that we're actively listening, and that we're reflecting back in a way that allows the client to explore. And then awareness generation. So what new insights have you gained about this situation? What have you learned about yourself? What else may be going on? And then challenging any limiting beliefs to encourage self-exploration. So what might be another explanation or perspective on this issue? Something that allows them to explore it a little bit. And then challenging and encouraging. So we want to push the clients to go beyond their comfort zone. What's one step you could take that feels a bit outside your comfort zone? What's going to be different this time? Helps people to really see, that if they keep doing things the same, that they're going to get the same outcomes, and we really want it to be different. And so they need to take different action. Provide support and encouragement to build the client's confidence. So how can I support you as you take on this new challenge? I want to commend you on the hard work you've done in this session. You shifted from A to B. And then the action planning. So you're collaboratively developing action steps. So what specific actions will you commit to before our next session? What is the next or some other actions you can take? Ensure these actions are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So SMART goals are a good way to handle action items in a coaching session. So when you want to have this completed by, how will you measure your progress on these actions? Things along those lines. And then supporting client growth. So support clients in achieving their personal and professional goals by helping them to overcome any obstacles. What obstacles do you think could get in the way of you accomplishing your action plan? How can you plan to overcome them? And then support the client to achieve results by helping them to build an accountability. Who or what would support you in accomplishing this? And this is something that I usually talk about in the level 1 class, but sometimes or a good practice is when you first meet with a client for their onboarding is to ask them typically, how do they build in accountability? Do they need outside accountability? Do they typically put self accountability into place? Because that will make this question more specific, depending on the action items that they want to take. So if you know that they typically need outside support from a spouse or a friend or a boss or whatever, then you can just say, will so-and-so be supporting you in this action? Or how can so-and-so support you in this action? If you know that that's going to be that person. And then we want to summarize the session. So key points, review action items, timelines, and accountability. Now, the best way is to actually have the client do this. You can start it in our session today. You wanted to, whatever that coaching agreement was, what are the action items that you came up with in the timeline, and kind of get them to repeat it back to you. But sometimes that's not doable, depending on the client. So it might be that you're actually going through that, and then you can get that confirmation. Does that sound accurate? And then partner with the client to close the session. So how much progress have you made towards what you wanted to accomplish? Again, that's something that you can ask about halfway through the session as well. And then what else would you like to explore about, whatever the outcome is that they were looking for before we close? Do you feel like we've been successful today? What was your biggest takeaway? What does it mean to you knowing XYZ? So different ways to get some clarity and help to explore there. You can even ask for feedback on the session to model continuous improvement. So what feedback do you have today, have for me about today's session? What could we potentially improve on for next time? And then closing, how would you like to close the session is the easiest way to close the session. For permanent, for the final piece. So again, just a simple kind of way to look at it, especially the coaching agreement part, to make sure that we're really clear on that. All right. Okay, so next, any questions on any of that? Okay. So next week, we are actually going to have, Holly, you're actually going to coach Lori. And that's the 29th, right? Yep. And I'm going to get your schedules up. I did do the schedules. I just have to upload them into the announcement section in UpCoach. So I'll get those uploaded, and you're going to start your buddy coaching the following week. So you can get those sessions in. And you can schedule them however you want. Just look at your pairing, reach out to each other and schedule them. Excuse me. And then you need to read chapter 5 for next week. Okay. All right. Any questions about anything? No. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I will see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend. Talk to you next week.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Cheryl.
You're
Great
welcome.
class. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks.